Welcome to the CEFACT Global Trust Registry project meeting in Australia, released the 28th of November in the middle of the day. We're going to kind of go through the people that have joined us today are all familiar with the whole process, and so I can shortcut a few things to get to the chase. We are all familiar with the code of conducts and the processes that CEFACT follow, I hope, about the open development process and royalty-free and the global good and all those sort of good things. We had an agenda we ran through yesterday. I'll share with you guys the kind of outcomes of that, and you're very welcome to see the recording, which I think is quite interesting, and the discussions and questions that we had. So yesterday we did a little bit of what we'll do today, a bit of recap 2 weeks ago, kind of a heads up on what the actions and current work are that we're working on. But what we really spent time on was the work that FIDES have been doing. FIDES is an interesting organization based out of the Netherlands, but with 20 plus subscribers or more sponsors, they call companies and other institutions that have become a part of the FIDES lab community. And they've built with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, the KVK, or Kavaka, I don't know how he says it, but there's a different way of pronouncing it in Dutch, a set of sandboxes and products and things that are really quite interesting, quite relevant to the grid and DIA. So we spent most of the time listening to Harman walk through. That recording is available to you all in the meetings folder that I hope you know where it is. And then we had a sort of Q&A after that. Along in the discussion were Harman and Victor, his colleague from FIDES, and Saeed, who's the project manager from KVK. Saeed was traveling on the train, but did a remarkable job of changing trains and walking and talking all at the same time. So it was pretty good. 2 weeks ago, we basically kind of went through a whole process of talking about various sort of legal requirements around digital identity anchors. I think there's a body of work still to do there. I've been busy cleaning up the stables that I made a mess of. So I've done some document merging and some other things, which you'll see if you look at the UN website, the UN.open source UNICC website. You'll see that the main documents are sort of beginning to coalesce into a fewer number, but hopefully more coherent. So the main work was to collapse documents 1, the eligibility requirements, into document 4, which is becoming a sort of generic operating manual, if you like, for the grid. So things like governance and technical requirements and eligibility and other things are going into that grid document, the number 4. And we're kind of separating out the digital identity anchor pieces into another set of documents that I'm also working on. So that's the sort of what we're doing. We also agreed 2 weeks ago that we would have the presentation by Harman, which we had, and then in 2 weeks from now, we'll have one by Alex Tweedale from Checked, both of whom said that what they've been doing is actually very relevant to our thinking, and I certainly can say Harman's work was very relevant. There is a few actions, one of which has your name on it, Sankashan, but basically work is carrying on. I'm sure we should add some more actions to our list about the document work that we're doing. But we have progress on pilots and a few other things that I'll talk to in a second, and ongoing work with the documents. And the reminder for us all on the documents is I'm currently the custodian, but I'm very happy for others to join me in the UNICC GitLab space in terms of sort of managing the content in there. I've been the sole kind of editor and merger and so on of that space, but others are welcome to join in and do the usual raise issues, fork the repo and do merge requests and so on, so we can kind of start working properly. At the moment, it's just kind of me managing that space and automatically produces web pages. The thinking is that will is already to some extent the official public face of the project. And the live editing, creative documents and discussions are going on in the Google document space because more people have easier access to Google Docs than they do to understanding how to do a raise an issue and do pull requests or merge requests in Git environments. That's the way we're going to carry on working for a while at least. Alina is now focusing on document number 4, and I'm focusing on I can't remember, it's document number 3, I think it is, the DIA document. then we went into, and I might actually show you where it is, but we went into the presentation by Harman. So if I break out of this for a second, have you all seen the meetings folder and that sort of stuff that we have? Is that known to you, Anne and Mark? Have you seen that content? Sankar, I think you've already seen this, haven't you? The meetings folder yet. If you haven't seen it, let me show you what we've got in there. This is a folder that's publicly accessible to all. It's where we put all of our recordings and notes. So this is coming over here. So this URL at the top here, I'll paste into the chat. But basically, that has all of the meetings we've ever had on this project and the decks that we've used and so on. And in the one here, and this is where I don't know if this is going to work, we've got yesterday's session. So that's what Harman did for us yesterday. It's probably 25 minutes of presentation about the work on the FIDES work. And then there's a bunch of Q&As that we had after his session about some sort of interesting things. So he will describe, if you watch this environment as a sandbox that is hosted by the Dutch Chamber of Commerce. It lets you do a number of interesting things about issuing verifiable credentials. These are verifiable credentials issued to wallets. FIDES is active in the European Business Wallet and EIDAS community. So the kind of technologies they're working with are those that are aligned to the European vision for EIDAS and for the sort of ongoing expansions there. Questions we were asking were things like, when does this become legal? So in other words, if there's a sandbox issuing kind of credentials and there's other things happening, when does the Dutch Parliament expect to make this sort of thing a legally significant digital artifact? Not yet, but soon, were the kind of answers we were getting from Saeed, the project manager who works for KBK. And we asked a number of other sort of points. You'll see if you watch this that, and this may be of very much interest to Mark, say, that they get to a point where it introduces the identifier as a legal person identifier, LPID, as they call it, despite the fact that he's talking about creating an organization ID. And that for us in this project has been one of the, I guess, recognitions that at a point in time, inevitably, it becomes of legal and appropriate interest as to who the people are that own a company, both from an end beneficiary's point of view for the whole things to do with anti-money laundering and anti-counterterrorism financing. Some of there's a global banking thing around the end beneficiaries for companies and so on. But also from is that person authorized to sign this invoice on behalf of a company or whatever else? So we know we're going to get to people, but what we've tried to do so far, and I think we still will want to do for the recommendation for July next year, is sort of abstract out to, let's just talk about organization ID at the beginning, and then we know we'll get to the personal ID. The reason I don't want to bring personal ID into this discussion right now is there's a lot of very important stuff to have happen in the personal ID space, and I don't want to get sort of slowed down by that. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so that is super interesting, but just to know that even though it appears that I might be working on personal ID because it's transparency and consent, but it's all organizational ID and it's controller ID, and it's very much the law requiring controller transparency to show what your authority is before you infer or collect personal data. So it's really very much about, fulfilling the existing legal requirements that are found in all jurisdictions and enforcing them according to standard. And that is enabling people to use organizational IDs to verify themselves instead of being identified. So it's instead of being identified, just to be clear, it's 100%, organizational, like controller ID, legal ID. It's not it's basically saying we should not have IDs. People should not be identified and carried around. They should only be identified through a controller online or in like normal human ways,
Yeah.
not in these backhanded, digital identification, backdoor technology ways. That's basically it.
That's and I sense, Mark, very strongly that the work you've been doing could be a way of us actually avoiding getting tangled up in that space by the very kind of mechanisms you've just been describing. And I'm very sympathetic to that thinking, having for years we unnecessarily identify ourselves too often. We should be presenting credentials that have the appropriate meaning, as opposed to just saying who we are and then sort of going from there. So a lot of, I agree. Obviously, a lot of good to be done there. So we had Harman presenting and a few questions and answers. You'll see, I looked at the notes and I've done a little bit of tweaking on these notes to sort of make them a bit more accurate, where there was some spelling errors and stuff. They're not very verbose. I think actually I can change a setting to say make them longer. So some of the, you'll be surprised that, in over an hour, we've only got a few paragraphs here, but I think there's some interest there. I encourage you to have a look, ask questions of Harman or myself or others that were in the meeting if you need. It was a pretty good session. Then about an hour and a half, no, half an hour after the end of that one, where there was a session in Senegal, in Dakar, or Sali, as I think the proper local name is for the city, where Steve Capel, who is the vice chair, one of the vice chairs for the UN CEFACT Bureau, was in person in Sali, as were a lady called Jian Huang, who's an international law expert, a professor from the University of Sydney. She was also in Senegal with Steve, and a few other parties, including Wan Afak, who is one of the leads for India for their part of this project. Oh, excellent. Here comes Brianna just in time. Welcome, Bree.
Oh, I found it. I found you.
Yes, you did. Well done. Congratulations. I was saying good things about you all the time until you've just arrived.
Thanks, John.
So we've. Do you want to give yourself a quick intro? I don't know if the others have met you before.
Sure. Hi, I'm Bree. I work as a senior policy analyst for the government of British Columbia in Canada. I have been working with Nancy Norris on the digital trust initiatives for the province for the past 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. Is it that long already? At least 2 years, if not 3. And I am hoping to help contribute to the policy recommendation 51 that will be informed by the critical raw materials project spearheaded by the UN CEFACT.
Thank you very much, Bree. You have 2 other fellow Canadians on the call. Anne and Mark are also in Canada, and Sankashan is in India. I'm still in Australia. I was just getting to the point, I think probably of most interest for you. We just whistled through a bit of the yesterday's meeting, as it is in my time zone, where Harman was explaining this FIDES work with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, KVK. That's really quite interesting. There's a recording of it, and I'll show you kind of where you can find these recordings. They're all in our meetings folder. They're all accessible to anybody with a link. So the most recent one is that one, and you can, any of us can pump this into our favorite AI tool and ask it to synthesize the recording and tell us just the key bits. But it's a good discussion. He presents the work they've been doing, and there's a bit of a Q&A of, I hope, some interest about where it's going next and the kind of problems they've been solving. In 2 weeks.
John, is that the FIDES? Is that the FIDES? Is that the FIDES work? FIDES?
FIDES. If you pronounce it that way, yes. FIDES is the way they call it. So they're this word here, FIDES Lab, or FIDES if you prefer to pronounce it FIDES.
I could be doing it wrong.
I don't know. It could be the same. It could be the same thing. It could be something different. I don't know. I'm not the sole arbiter of pronunciation. So yesterday at least it was pronounced in a slightly Dutch accent as FIDES. But it's probably that, because there are a lot of participants in the FIDES community. They've got quite a large sort of collection of sponsors and supporters. So yes, it's quite possible. Anyway, moving on. That was a very interesting little run through they gave. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have a group called Checked, giving us a similar sort of run through about what they've been doing in a similar space around trustworthy organization IDs and sort of interoperability and a whole bunch of other things that they've been building toolkits out for. What I was just getting onto as you arrived was that 30 minutes after yesterday's meeting, we had a symposium, seminar in the CEFACT 40th forum that's going on at the moment in Dakar, Senegal, or Sali, as I think the local name is for the country, the city. I just wanted to quickly sort of run through what that hour and a half was, and also, I guess, encouraging for those looking at pilots that we had one Afak, if that's the way you pronounce his name, Sankashan, from India, who was actually present at the conference, is present at the conference, and spoke for India's initiative in the pilot. So in that session, we had Alina Nikagales was actually in Geneva whilst presenting through. I was in Australia, so we were on a sort of the electronic panel, I suppose. Steve Capel was sort of master of ceremonies for the panel discussion. Jean Huang, from professor of law from University of Sydney, international law. She's an expert in UN Citral and MLETR thing. So she spoke for 20 minutes or so towards the end. And we had a Q&A session. I think Sankashan was listening in the Q&A session. So we had some good questions from the audience, I think, in person and also online as to the project. And subsequently, I've had a reach out from the Alina and I have had a reach out from the UK. Her Majesty's Customs and Excise are interested in the project as well. So it was a good session. What Alina was asked to present, and again, there should be a recording, I don't know if it's been published yet, was kind of why is Spain co-leading the GTR project? So this deck is, like all of our decks, available to all of you, and it sort of talks through the kind of background work that Spain have been doing for quite a few years now that led them to be a position of wanting to be a co-lead of the GTR project. So the several years that is referred to here, I think in a later slide, you'll see that Alina goes to sort of 20 plus, 25 years almost of digitization efforts. And like many countries, they started from a system or a situation of many registrars across the geography of Spain, and this whole process of consolidation and rationalization and digitization and then so on and so on. So there's quite a body of work, obviously, to get to the point they've got to now. So she then sort of went through the two pillars, the idea of a grid, digital identity anchor, what the grid is going to be, it's registry of registries and so on, and then the basis of Spain's interest in this and the sort of legal foundation. So I encourage you, if you have the time, to listen to Alina's sort of walk through this. I can't do the justice she can to the work, but basically it provided the sort of I guess background as to why Spain are a keen contributor and active participant in this whole project. They are already engaged in their pilot work, so that's actually got the budget, and they're going ahead with implementation of digital identity anchors and issuance and so on. They've got these authoritative identifiers that they're already working with, the IRUS, CRU, and the registry validated electronic filings. They've already kind of worked through, I suppose, as to how this DIA adds value to what Spain has already done. They're also, and I think we see this in a later slide, yes, they're very active in the European initiative called WeBuild, which is another multinational and multi-participants initiative focusing more on the business side of things. So company representative use cases and so on. So whole bunch of sort of reasons of why for the audience in Senegal and online as to why Spain are co-leading. Sorry, go ahead.
That's awesome. I think that's really strong, and having the background of the modernization and digitization of different regions and bringing them all online, and then having a digitized starting place is huge.
Yeah, yeah. So they're quite proud. Actually, in Spain, if you watch the economic sort of patterns of the last few years of Europe, Spain are doing very well as a country. Actually, at the moment, they're doing kind of outperforming many of the usual reasonable performers in Europe. So growing faster than Germany and France and other countries. So they're doing really well, which is great. We obviously gave an invitation to Africa, because if you look at the sort of the map, if you like, of these groups that we already have with we very much include you, Bree. So the pilot from Canada is sort of locked in, right? But
well,
we've
that's good, because I have some updates on that.
okay, good.
Yeah, I do have some thinking and some updates. We have a little bit of funding towards the reference implementation that we plan to use, not just for, like, primarily for the CRM work for Canadian copper supply chains, but the way that we've been able to position it is through Innovate BC as part of their creating a critical minerals test bed, and including a digital aspect of that. And so what I'm hoping for, and what I've pitched to Nancy, and she thinks is I could move forward, is that we try to get a federal test pilot, like at the federal group. And so as G7 leaders this year, alongside the commitment for standards-based critical raw materials or critical minerals market,
Yeah,
I'm hoping that we can secure some funding to do a federal-sized pilot, and having a tool like a reference implementation that's ready to go will really help facilitate that. So that I know that Nancy has been working at getting people together in the room to get the yes, and so it's been rescheduled a couple of times, and I do have a meeting in the books next week, and I'm hoping to be able to give an update.
Cool.
For that.
That is good news, and you obviously have our support too. So if there's if it helps, myself, Alina, and I know Steve Capel will be very happy to sort of step into meetings or do whatever we can to encourage. I know previously we've been asked by the Indian delegates as to what sort of resources are available, and by which we infer the sort of tools and frameworks and other things that are available. And quite a lot of what's been coming out of the UNTP space obviously gives us some of that sort of basic raw materials, basic tools that we can use to help build some of these content. So yes, there are some things that can be used by pilots to help accelerate the process. But I think you guys already know about these things, because I know that you've got a close connection into the UNTP space as well. I don't think we got an immediate response from the African countries when we offered this last night, my time last night, their morning. But I think we're reasonably hopeful that we may get some encouragement. We got the UK, to our surprise, reaching out to us in the few hours after the presentation. I then spoke for a little bit, and I won't bore you by me speaking again about it, but I went through the kind of explanations about this logical model that actually triggered one of the questions, because as the observer from I'm not sure, Sweden, I think he's based, commented that looks like a centralized architecture, to which I replied, of course, it's a logical model, not a physical model. Yes, we do intend this to be as decentralized, distributed as possible, and so on. So we had a good discussion about that. And then we talked to the idea of the digital identity anchor and sort of what that means and how it's created and so on. So after that point, we got to a very interesting part of the discussion that I don't have slides for, but I'll just quickly explain, which was Jean has been working on another white paper the CEFACT is about to publish, or has just published. She had a QR code for the paper, I think, available, which is talking to the interoperability of law at a sort of, a next level of thinking beyond UN CITRAL and MLETR, a mutual recognition sort of process. So she's taken a legal perspective on what it might take for equivalency in law for various things. In that she drew a pyramid. The base of this pyramid is this sort of decentralized, lots of things and decentralized. The top of the pyramid is centralized, where this idea of centralized and decentralized, for some architects in technology is a sort of, they prefer decentralized, but her thinking was centralized here meant everybody has gathered around the same set of legal understandings about things. So for her, centralized equals simplified, common understandings in a legal sense, and decentralized means many different interpretations. And basically decentralized is where we are right now for most things. Listening to Jean and speaking also with Alina a little afterwards, I'm kind of encouraged, because I think the basic thinking we have here in this idea about this registry or this directory of registrars is very much accommodates a currently decentralized way of thinking. In other words, each entry for a registrar would recognize what legal basis that they use to issue their recognition, their registrations, and so on. And if those legal recognitions become the same or have a common basis, well, fantastic. It means that you could more easily understand whether something is trustworthy or not. But right now we're mapping the current reality, and we're letting people know, okay, if you've received a organization identifier from Bolivia, this is the basis of the Bolivian law for registration of companies, and it means this. So it's sort of I think it's for us, seeing Jean's work is great. It's encouraging, but it neither sort of destabilizes us or whatever else. It's like, okay, we can live with this. It's good.
I had the chance to sit on a panel with Jean, discussing a little bit of the findings of that white paper as it leads to sort of where we think Rec 51 needs to go, which is introducing some sort of framework around traceability law, international traceability law, and some of the discussion that we had on that in that group, in that panel, was around the idea of model laws. So coming up with a model law that gives you sort of a framework for and defines what mutual recognition looks like across jurisdictions. And I'm trying to address some of the conflict of laws. And for me, reviewing the work and doing some digging and trying to understand and come to an educated point, was so much of what we do is based off of having a core standard like UNCP. But in order for that standard to work, much the same way as the internet does, it requires some governance and trust layers, which I feel like this is the work that you are doing with this. It is how to establish trust registries and what that looks like in a decentralized way. And the missing piece was related to the law, the model law. So when we look at e-commerce and e-signatures, they have model law frameworks that are then interpreted in a decentralized way across jurisdictions. And so I got really excited about it because I felt like between this group, UNTP, and a model law framework, we've got the three pegs needed for a framework, like a layered governance framework that enables UNTP to scale.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you. Keep going.
Yeah, no,
I agree. I'm very excited too. That's why I interrupted. But there are so many reasons why we're combining things at the same time that are meaningful at an important time, right? One of the kind of moments, I suppose, for many of us was when the idea of free trade, of tariff-free trade at least, was sort of was upset recently, and there's a huge amount of tariffs and stuff been over. Well, what's true about even that situation is certainty about origin, certainty about how things have been done, where things have come from, where the raw materials have come from, is essential even in that world. So it's sort of it doesn't actually destabilize the need for the things we're trying to produce here. Transparency and clarity are essential in all of these environments. So I kind of think we're doing the right thing at the right time, and hopefully we've got the right ingredients. So it is very encouraging. Alina, of course, is also a lawyer and a land registry lawyer in particular. But I've been encouraging Jean, and there's another lady who is an expert in UN Citral law here in Australia, to review what we have so far been sketching out in our documents. So I'm trying to get that sort of another set of legal eyes to look at what we've been writing. Mark, go ahead.
Hi. So I've got something really sort of interesting that's maybe in parallel, is that we're working on consulting regulators, which we mean data privacy authorities, DPAs, on what a digital privacy officer certification program, and we're really for managing registries and the legal compliance. They have, in particular, controller registries. So there's in the UK they have a controller registry already, which provides like the legal authority of an organizational identifier. And that was, it was 1998. Anyways, it hasn't moved on much, and that required information had, never went forward, and it's sort of been taken over by industry. So there's a lot of regulatory gaps, but the concept really is that using, international Convention 108 plus regulation and rules, that you're able to have a digital privacy officer, sign a police, based token for access to information in another jurisdiction. So it's basically, controller registry based authority, and it's using, international law and treaty that's been developing for over 40 years, and standards that are, so it's very mature and old, right? Yeah, and it's also, enforcing laws or implementing laws that have been there for a very long time. It's taken a long time to become enforceable. So there's that, and what we're doing is we're sending survey out about regulatory questions, in regards to the interoperability of data governance. And what's really funny is that the concept is really about decentralizing data governance. So in the context of, so there's I guess an alternative opinion versus on the legal side about, enabling people to govern their own digital assets and information. So I think that's maybe a different concept of governance, but I could send that survey, I could share that survey to you guys if you like.
Yeah, Mark, I'm always interested. And I think that does sound like it's going to have some relevant sort of content. It's almost impossible to keep on top of everything, but I'm very much keen to sort of learn about what's going on, or what's happened in the past that we could learn from. That was sort of, from my point of view, that was more or less what I wanted to talk today. We've had the yesterday session with Harman and the work of Des. Encourage you to look at the video if you can. The Senegal discussions went pretty well. So what did India say? Now, unfortunately, at this point, we had technical challenges in the combination of the headquarters of the UN in Geneva trying to run a web session that was hosted in Senegal. And it was quite comic if you weren't actually trying to be part of the panel and doing things. But we kind of got there in the end a little, but the audience unfortunately didn't have good access to mics. So when the Indian delegate was speaking about the Indian pilot, the volume was very difficult to hear online. But I could see that the transcript was being generated automatically, and because I could see behind someone else's head on one of the other windows. So I'm hopeful that we'll have in the sort of the statements made. Now, what I did hear was encouraging. I heard sort of reconfirmations of commitment to the pilot process, and that India has the sort of a number of ambitions about what they want to do here. And as we all know, India is the fastest growing economy in the world right now. So I think there's a fair amount of heft behind it if they do decide to do something. So that was again encouraging. That was the last few minutes of the session yesterday in Senegal. I'll quickly show you, I'll show you quickly what has been entertaining me. This is the, actually it's my local version of it, but it'll be on the main pages in a second. This is me playing with the current project sort of folder structure, and I'm the presentation of these documents, and I'm working on the markdown to try and clean up and do some things that are going to make it a bit simpler to look at. This is what I'm calling the I'll go to the proper page, the sort of official face of the project. So the UN hosted content. All of these documents are still very much draft, and most of them should actually declare that as a status at the beginning. But that's where the official documents are going. Our Google Doc slides and Google Documents are very much the creative, live, dynamic content, and the rest of it is sort of moved over to GitLab as and when we can. Brianna.
John, are you sharing your screen? Are we supposed to be seeing something?
Oh dear. I was thinking I was sharing my screen. I'll now share my screen and you can see what I was talking about. There you go. How long have I not been sharing my screen for? The whole session? Yeah, probably. Well, thank you for putting your hand up and telling me that, Marie. This is a GitLab environment hosted by the UNICC, and we've moved all of our Google Docs into this space over the last few weeks and months, and we're creating all the kind of recreating the content that we had in the Google Docs into Markdown documents as they are on GitLab, and that is automatically generating a web page system through Docusaurus. So basically, any visitor who wants to know about the project, the GTR project, we are now sort of directing to this site. It's reasonable. I'm not embarrassed by this anymore, I suppose.
I'm not embarrassed by it. Is it live?
Yeah.
Is it live?
Yeah. So I'll share the link in this chat. It's live. So this is the published website material. And it's also got the sort of working project documents. And I kind of publish and be damned was kind of the way I was thinking, that whilst these documents all declare themselves to be draft and they're very volatile and there's lots of work going on, I don't mind people being able to see them, because I think it's important that people get a sense of what we're working on. The encouragement I want to give you all is that please join me in the UNICC GitLab space. So you can apply. I think it's easier to get an account in this than it is to get an account as an expert under UN CEFACT. So the actual environment, back to here, the actual environment is a standard sort of UNICC hosted GitLab. So it's a specific instance of GitLab where the UNICC host it. And under here are all of the, go ahead, Brie.
To get access to the GitLab, what's the process for that? Do you know?
Did you say the purpose or the?
What's the process? How do we get access?
There's a, I have previously shared, but I'll dig it out again, a URL that's like the link that you go to sort of log in and register. Sankashan, you've done that. Are you doing that right now? Okay. Sankashan will share a link in a second around the place to go to. What it basically is you apply for an account and you kind of fill in a few details, and then you get we're processing your request. And in my experience, it was a reasonably quick turnaround. Daylight working time I think it's a New York hosted environment. So when New York's up and running, you should get a reasonable quick turnaround. And then you're in. So if we look at this project, the GTR project, I'll show you kind of how this all of the UNTP work, for example, is now here. So if you want to know what's happening in terms of issues and pull requests and so on UNTP, it's now in this GitLab environment, not on GitHub anymore, but in GitLab. And this is where their work is going. So you've got with issues, you've got 122 issues that they're trying to close through, and they're actively working on right now, and a bunch of other things. So you can find out about that UNTP project. You can find out about all of the UNCP packages. So I think the critical raw minerals is going on here, critical materials is going on here, I think, as well, Bree, as are the textiles and so on, and other sorts of projects. So this is going to be the home for all of the live projects. for CEFACT. We've moved away from the collaborative CEFACT environment, CUE, which was a Confluence, Atlassian side. It was really not ideal from a dynamic multi-person collaborative project point of view. It was a sort of fairly static space, and it wasn't easily managed, and it only had 80% availability. Otherwise, it was great. I don't have any problem with Confluence, but yes, good, thank you. There's the link on the chat for signing up, and everybody I think is welcome to attend. So if I go to the project and show you who's currently sort of able to edit it, members. And I am sharing my screen. Good, I am sharing my screen. Yes. so Sankashan, you can see, is in there. My colleague from Suzu, Joe, is in here. A few other names you might know from the UNTP working group, like Ashley, are here. But we don't. The others, and Anne, you've managed to get in as well. So Anne's in there as well. So that's where we're going to start sort of more focused raising of issues and more considered merge requests as we kind of get these documents into a more mature state. And that's it. So if I show you my work at the moment, is mostly on getting these documents into a we merged documents 1 and 4. 1 was eligibility requirements for registrars, and number 4 was the operating manual, if you like, for the grid. And we kind of realized that number 4 is going to become a sort of super document of operating procedures, eligibility requirements, technical discussions, fees, and so on. But how would you run the grid is what document 4 is going to be. This one here. And the other document 3, which is the DIA document, is going to grow into the body of work of the DIA. And that's how we'll manage it over the next few days and weeks. Okay. Well, I'm sorry I wasn't showing my screen, because these were the slides that these are the slides that I was reading out of about Spain and what it's been doing. So those are going to be available to all. I'll share the link for that. But these are in our probably linked. So you're welcome to have a look at that. That will sort of tell you a bit about what the Spanish history is and why it's co-leading. And you already have this link, I think, here for the work we're doing, today's presentation. Okay. Any last requests? Any comment? Any last comments? Okay. Thank you very much. I think. Oh yeah. I had that same link. I had that same link at the end of the last slide, but thank you, Sankashan, for pulling it out. I had a quick summary about the work I'm doing on UNICC. This rather, I've learned more things than I ever wanted to learn about Node.js and a few other bits and pieces, but that's just the life.
I am just a little bit curious about your transitioning to the GitLab space and moving over. How was that?
It was. It didn't need to be. Okay, I wasn't, but now I am probably experienced at all in GitLab or in, a little bit in GitHub. I've been using the GitHub environment that UNTP had been on, and I'd been raising requests and pull requests and so on. But the whole creating a Docusaurus managed or presented set of pages using Markdown, when there were just wrinkles to get through, right? But if you've got anybody that's done that before in your team, there's no reason for it to be hard. So if you take I think what Steve has done for your project here, let me go here, is to create a kind of shrink wrapped environment. So if this is your space, then what should be the case is that the folder down here of website and docs, you just need to drop. If you create a new folder in here, so in specification, if you create a new folder, it'll automatically appear on the web pages. If you create a new Markdown document, Docusaurus will pick it up and give you a new sort of page set. It's very quick and easy once you've got it sort of running the way you want. I wanted to do things like change all the colors to be UN aligned, so I changed the cascading style sheets, and I wanted the font to be Roboto, and I wanted all the sorts of weird stuff. So I ended up spending lots of time. But I think once your environment's up and running and working, it should be reasonably simple for you to kind of move to here. You can save any Google Doc as a Markdown document, so you can kind of do that transition reasonably easily. I can't see if this is yet running producing a web page. I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Let's look at pipelines. No, there's some build processes going on for your site at the moment. 25 minutes ago, actually.
Yeah, I'm just looking through it. I'm trying to get, you know how on GitHub you've got a link that takes you to the web page.
Yes.
So
here's
here.
You can see it here. So if you're on the main, so there's a number of ways they can do it. This is like the project information. So you edit the basic project information, you paste into that a link as they've done here. And so if I click that now, we should see what that web page looks like. I suspect it will, yes, it looks very like the UNTP web page, right? So what they've done is they've just lifted the content into the UNTP kind of structure. Whereas I've gone for just because I like giving myself lots of work, I went for I have to go to another page. I went for a different look for mine. I don't know why I did that, but I did. So I just decided to go for build it from scratch, kind of almost Docusaurus thing. So mine doesn't quite look like. There is a reason, to be honest. I wanted the grid GTR work to look different to UNTP. There needs to be sort of an understanding this is a different project that has a different symbiotic, sympathetic aims and ambitions, but it doesn't need to look the same. Whereas critical raw materials, the RBA stuff, they can look like as they are extensions of the UNTP protocol. So it makes sense they have the same family look and feel. Sankashan.
Could you go back to the GTR page once more? Do you have the dark mode turned on?
No. But I can.
Click on that and see how the page looks. It looks quite odd.
Yeah, I know the colors come up a bit sort of funny. But if I go to, so that's because of the flash, the sort of the way you set up the cascading style sheet. So I can play with that. But the rest of the content, the actual content that matters, looks okay in dark mode. Right, so it's like I could. Oh, Sankashan, if you want to have a go at the front page, go ahead.
I knew this was coming up, and I'm going to not do that.
Because
the reason I asked is that I don't have it set on dark as default. So I was quite surprised that you and I were looking at the same page but different ways. That's okay.
Yeah, so it does look better in light mode. What I was trying to, so just a quick diversion. This image here is one single PNG type image or SVG, both formats, right? And I was trying to make the same image work whether it was a light background or a dark background. The paradox is that when I go to a dark background, it's actually lightened the background of this page, which is like paradoxical. So I should probably work on don't do that, because the rest of what it does is fine, right? The rest of the pages look fine. Even the other diagrams, there's a diagram in the digital identity anchor piece. And other than the fact that I forgot to make those transparent behind the text, that looks okay too. So it's working okay in light and dark, but yeah, the front page. And I just want to get the meaning of the words right first. Actually, Sankashan, I want to get this stuff right.
Yeah. I am not very hung up on how it looks at this point in time, because I think we need a whole bunch of issues created and then addressed sequentially as well in the coming, at least in December.
Yeah. Let's start doing this work properly. Yes, it's chaotic at the moment. I think it's one way to describe it. So cool. Okay, that's way more than enough. If that's okay with everybody, it's great to hear of what's happening with Nancy and your work. Very much encourage it or repeat the offer if we can help make things happen. Then don't hesitate.
Let me take you up on that. Let's see who shows up next week, and I'll work with Nancy maybe asking to present this particular piece around a digital identity anchor that would then be able to be registered.
Cool.
Because at this point in time, we're not going to be able to get BC registries on board. And I think also, too, it's a good bridge to a federal tax base. And I would really love to engage at that level with this particular piece of work. I think it's a really good fit.
Yeah, perfect. Well, absolutely. Then yes, the offer's there, and I know Steve and Elena will be keen to help as well on time zones, whatever. But yes. Okay, is there a link to Lena's presentation? Yeah, I shared a link to the if we're talking about the Senegal presentation. Yes, I shared a link.
What date is it? I have the meeting link. What date is it? I don't know. It's not. They're not like labeled by location.
Yeah, they're not in the same folder. The Senegal presentation is in a different space on the drive. So the Senegal meeting. So this is the sort of structure we have for the drive, and then the top level of that we've got a whole bunch of sort of the explainers and other things that aren't meetings and whatever. And in there is the Senegal presentation. So this is the one we actually ran through, and I'll paste the link again in case I didn't do it. Copy link done.
Thanks. Yeah, I just thought that there might have been a recording of Lena talking about it.
I think there is, Mark.
I'm just looking at. Okay.
There is, Mark. I think there's going to be one. I just don't have it at the moment because it's going to come out of the 40th forum of the CEFACT in Senegal, and I believe it's going to be publicly accessible. That would be its normal process, but I just haven't got the link yet. And I'll look forward to it because I'll hopefully be able to hear India clearly this time.
Can I ask a question?
Okay. Well, are there any like working? Oops, sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
I think I have a bit of a delay, so I'm just wondering if there's any meetings on the anchor or if there's like a page for that specifically, like a discussion or.
Yes, there are. So in prior meetings, you can see all the meetings we've got here. We walked through the current thinking about the digital identity anchor and how it works. Typically, certainly in the earlier meetings, we almost each time, because we were having new people join us, we were going through an explainer sort of process about how the thinking works, how the digital identity anchor piece works. I could find one that has that walkthrough in it. I did it again for Senegal. That was what I kind of walked through. So if that link might serve many purposes, it will give us the Lena's walkthrough of Spain. It'll give me doing the DIA discussion again. And also we'll hear India's commitment to the pilot. So maybe that's the best thing for me to do to share. But you're very welcome to. You can use AI to look through this stuff if you want to. I'm sure, but there will be a couple of instances where we walked through the DIA before and had discussions about it, including one, Mark, that might be particularly interesting about Goliath.
So you're not working. Oh. I'm just wondering if there's work going on still in that, if there's actively work going on.
Absolutely, yes. This whole project has two main pillars. One is defining this idea about GRID, the global registry of registrar information directory. So the map of, as I like to call it, of all the registrars. And the other thing is about applying and recommending how to apply the digital identity anchor. Now that spec at the moment is a UNTP hosted spec. What we are doing in a project is actively trying to apply that spec with registrars and doing pilots and taking the lessons we learned from that to improve the spec of the DIA. Now, there's two ways to improve the spec. One is the sort of desk-based research, expert review. There's ways to improve the specification before even implementing. And there are other experience from actually building something and finding that, okay, this works, this doesn't work. So we'll have these two strands coming in to improve the DIA spec. My recommendation has been that that remains hosted by the UNTP sort of body of work, because otherwise we have the DIA spec inside one space and everything, all the other credentials that UNTP uses in another, and that sort of doesn't make too much sense. So my agreement with Steve Capel, who kind of is the chair for the UNTP project, is that we will recommend issue pull requests and so on into the UNTP spec as we come up with improvements.
Just on that note, John, I was looking at the I was looking at your deliverables and deadlines.
That hasn't been updated for a little while, thank you, Bree. But yes, we are. I think. Are you looking at the public webpage? Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so I was just curious, like the final DIA ERS, that would be what we're going to be using for testing purposes. Yes.
Yes. The current. So at the moment, the pilots will take as the basic ingredients the digital identity anchor spec that exists right now, and the process that is described of how issuance works and verification works. And I have no doubt that each of the pilots will make observations about the application of that specification, and then we'll feed that back in.
Is that 0.6? Are we like what are we at with the?
We're behind on the pilots. The pilots haven't kicked off actively yet. Spain, I think, has probably kicked off, and I need to sort of I don't know.
But for the UNTP DIA spec, are we usually what's the versioning that we're planning to go live with? Is that 0.6?
Yes. The version that, so if I go to, okay, now I understand, sorry. If I go to UNTP right now, the current version, we go with the current version, which I think is, you're right, it's 0.6. I think they've got a 0.7 in the plan. So they have a, they're 0.6.1 at the moment.
Okay.
But that's what we'd use.
Okay. I was just curious about that. Where that was at. That's kind of been.
Can I get a link to that?
It's the same. It's the same link, Mark. It's this. This is the whole of this UNICC sort of space hosts all of the projects for CEFACT and actually for a whole bunch of the UN stuff. So if I go to the UN, it's quite exciting. You see all these things. But most of them are empty branches, right? But yeah, it's going, oh, we could look at all this. So within UNECE, you've got sustainable transport and CEFACT. Then within CEFACT, you've got the projects that we saw a little earlier.
So I have another question about
this.
Yeah, sure. Are there any opportunities for crossover into other UNECE projects like the single window or some of the other pieces, the trade corridors?
I'd love them to be. I have no issue with that. The only caveat is I want it to accelerate what we're trying to do rather than decelerate it. So in other words, if we can do that, that would be fantastic, because it would, I think, validate these areas of work which I see as strongly supportive of each other. But what I don't want to do is to sort of get tangled up in a mire of sort of, oh, we'll have to do this and that, and it kind of gets slower. That some of the, I'm now going to, so the answer is yes. I'm now going to give a bit of a caveat. We've all worked in many times and spaces where if a project starts looking like it's got a bit of a momentum and potential and interest behind it, people often want to stick their ideas onto it.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And it's actually got a formal theory, which I'll give the informal name. It's called garbage can theory. And it happens when you drop something unintentionally into a garbage can, and when you lift it out, it's got lots of things stuck to it. So the theory comes from organizational theory, and it comes from a very serious professor. But the idea is that you want to attract the right kind of sticky on bits and not the wrong kind. So you kind of will. I'm behind a little on schedule in several parts of this project at the moment, but I don't want to discourage alignment and working with others. I just don't want to slow down. So that's where That's where I'm thinking, Bree. That's the thing. Steve, just quickly on single trade windows. Steve has a more experienced eye on that than I do, and his view is interesting. We should ask Steve's directly opinion, but the basic idea is that if you had a prior situation on cross-border or on border control where there were 40 separate institutions that managed the importation of different types of goods, when you get a single window, what Steve says is you get 41, because the 40 that are specialists at importing certain types of goods still need to do their specialist work. But now you've got a one in the front that does the sort of the corralling of all the requests and stuff coming in, but there's still the same complexity behind the scenes. So it doesn't necessarily simplify. It might actually obscure. But that may not be a shared view by many. So the answer is still yes. If there are interested projects that we can collaborate with, let's try and make it work.
Okay. I'm
over time. I'm sorry. We normally finish a few minutes early, but it's been great. Thank you. I'll keep to all my promises. So this meeting at least has been recorded. You'll get the notes and you'll get the minutes and so on. I'll publish those in about probably an hour or two when it's finished its processing. And I'll share Senegal as soon as I can. And I wish you all a great weekend.
Great to meet you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks.